Hey grade 7s and welcome, and in this video we'll be looking at photosynthesis. We'll be looking at grade 7 science even as we prepare for our grade 7 final examinations, and we'll be looking at the topic on photosynthesis. So I believe you all have heard of photosynthesis. You've heard the word photosynthesis before, and I believe you've got an understanding or an idea of what photosynthesis talks about. So when we talk of photosynthesis, this word photosynthesis has two parts, or rather is made up of two parts. We've got this part, which is the photo, and we've got the other part, which is the synthesis. Okay, so we've got the photo and we've got the synthesis. So when you talk of photosynthesis, we are talking of a word made up of two different words that have different meanings. Okay, so the term photo simply means, or rather comes from a Greek word which simply means light. On the other hand, the term synthesis means bringing together or putting together different things. So let's say putting together. So when we talk of photosynthesis, we are talking about light bringing together, or rather making. Let me rather say synthesis can mean adding or making. So when we talk of photosynthesis, we are saying making out of light. Okay, so let's dwell much into this topic on photosynthesis and see how best we can understand it as grade 7s. Okay, so animals need energy. You yourself, you need energy to survive, and literally every living thing needs energy for it to survive. So imagine if you could just wake up one day, you don't have to eat, you don't have to drink anything, and imagine how that day would be for you. You haven't eaten the whole day, you haven't drunk anything the whole day. How would you feel? I believe you'd say you'd feel really hungry because you haven't eaten, because you don't have energy. So similarly, all living things need energy. And plants are living things and they too need energy. So when we are dealing with photosynthesis, we are simply talking of how plants make their own energy. So for us, animals and human beings and literally every other living thing that we can think of, we get energy from plants. While on the other hand, plants make their own food. They make their own energy. So when we talk of photosynthesis, we're simply talking of, when we talk of photosynthesis, we are simply talking of the process. So I'm going to give you two definitions. This first definition is one that you understand right now as we begin looking at photosynthesis. Then I'll give you another definition at the end of this lesson, and it will make much more sense because you'd have understood what photosynthesis is. So for the beginning, we're going to say photosynthesis is the process by which plants make their own food. Make their own food. So this is a preliminary definition of photosynthesis that you can understand as we begin. So photosynthesis is a process by which plants make their own food. Okay, so how do plants make their own food? How do plants make their own food? Well, through photosynthesis, plants use the energy of light, because we said the word photo means light. They use the energy of light to to make their own food, to make a meal for themselves. And they use light, they use water, and they use carbon dioxide. We know what water is? Yes. Do we know what carbon dioxide is? Well, carbon dioxide is a gas. When you breathe in and then you breathe out, most of the air that you breathe out is what is known as carbon dioxide. So for us humans, we breathe in oxygen, we take in the oxygen. Oxygen is what is important for us. While on the other hand, plants take in carbon dioxide. So for us, we take in oxygen and release carbon dioxide, while plants take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen. Okay? So we said the agents that are used in photosynthesis, in the making of food, are light. Light. Where does light come from? Are we talking about light from a bulb, from a fluorescent tube, from a torch, or from a phone, or from the sun? Well, we are talking about light from the sun. So in photosynthesis, sunlight is needed. It is one of the most important things that is needed for plants to make their own food. Apart from sunlight, we also need, I said plants also need carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide. So the light is coming from the sun. What of the carbon dioxide? Where is the carbon dioxide coming from? Well, the carbon dioxide is coming from the atmosphere. It's coming from the environment around the plants. So in this environment that we're living in, there are different gases that are present, and one of them is carbon dioxide. So plants get the carbon dioxide and use it to make their own food. So carbon dioxide coming from, let's say, atmosphere. What else is needed for photosynthesis to take place? Well, plants, apart from light and carbon dioxide, they also need water. Now, where does the water come from? Where do plants get their water? The water comes from the soil. The water that no wonder when you are planting and you've got your maize, you've got your different flowers, you've got any type of plant that you've planted, you are told to water your plants. Why? Because plants need that water to make their own food. Okay? Plants need that water for photosynthesis. So plants need water, so they need water coming from the soil. When you're watering your plants, you pour the water on the soil just next to the plants, just near the plant there, and that water is drained into the soil, and the plants get that water from the soil and use it in the process of photosynthesis. Are we together? Okay, grade 7s. So, important things that you need to know is that photosynthesis is a process by which plants make their own food. And for plants to make their own food, 3 things are necessary. And those 3 things are, firstly, sunlight. Secondly, carbon dioxide. And thirdly, water. Are we together? Okay. So we can move on. We can move on and see what else we can learn about photosynthesis. So we've talked of sunlight. Let's look at each of the raw materials, the ingredients that are needed to make their own food. So I've said they need water, carbon dioxide, and sunlight. These can be looked at as the ingredients to make the food. Okay? You know how you add tomato, you add your salt, you add your beef, and you add your cooking oil and everything when cooking. Well, we can think of sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water in the same way. We can look at them as ingredients that are needed to make food for the plants. Okay, so let's look at each ingredient step by step and individually. So let's look at the first one, and well, they are all important. So let's look at the first one, which is sunlight. So as I said, plants get the sunlight from the sun. So they get the sunlight from the sun. And how do they get the sunlight? How do plants get the sunlight? Well, when we look at plants, most plants have a green color. Do you know what gives plants a green color? Well, what gives plants a green color is what is known as chlorophyll. If you had watched or if you have seen our video on cells, grade 7s, then the word chlorophyll, the term chlorophyll shouldn't be new to you. Chlorophyll is some green substance that is found in the leaves or in the plants, in the plant cells, and this chlorophyll is what gives plants a green color. Apart from that, this chlorophyll traps the sunlight. So when sunlight goes onto a plant, what happens is that parts that have chlorophyll will trap the sunlight in the plant. Will trap the sunlight in the plant, and this chlorophyll is mostly found in the leaves. That's why you find that most leaves are green, because of chlorophyll. So chlorophyll traps the sunlight. So chlorophyll in the cells, chlorophyll, let me say chlorophyll in the leaves, traps sunlight. So if anyone ever asks you to say what is the importance of chlorophyll in a plant, the importance of chlorophyll is that it is used in the process of photosynthesis. It is used to trap the sunlight. Okay? It is used to trap the sunlight so that the sunlight can be used for photosynthesis. Apart from that, chlorophyll gives plants their green color. Okay? So chlorophyll gives plants a green color and is important in the process of photosynthesis because it traps the sunlight. Are we together, grade 7s? Okay. What else do we need to know about the sunlight? Well, sunlight is very, very important in the process of photosynthesis. Without sunlight, there cannot be photosynthesis. If you get plants and keep them in a place that is hidden from sunlight, that plant will die because it is not receiving the sunlight which gives it, which is important in it for it to make food. And if it doesn't have the sunlight, it means that it won't make its own food. And if it doesn't make its own food, it means it will be starving. And if it's starving, it means it will eventually die. Just like you would die if you were starved of your own of food. Okay? Let's move on to the next ingredient in the making of the plant food. The second one that we're going to look at is carbon dioxide. Second one we're going to look at is carbon dioxide. So how do plants get the carbon dioxide? Well, remember what I said? We humans breathe in oxygen and release carbon dioxide, while plants, on the other hand, take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen. So when we think of the ecosystem, we think of the environment that we live in, we all depend on each other. We humans depend on plants to give us the oxygen, while we give them the carbon dioxide. Do you get that? So we live in a balanced world where without plants we would not have the oxygen, and without us the plants would not have the carbon dioxide. And that is why we are usually encouraged to plant more trees and to have more plants around so that we can have enough oxygen for everyone. Anyways, that was us side Trillion. So let's get back to the lesson. So how do plants get this carbon dioxide? Well, the carbon dioxide is just absorbed through the leaves. So the plants have small openings, and these small openings are in the leaves. So through those openings, the carbon dioxide enters the plant cells and is used for photosynthesis. Okay? So carbon dioxide is important and is absorbed through the leaves. I wanted to say any question, but we can move on. So carbon dioxide through the leaves. Then lastly, we've got water. These are the three ingredients needed for plants to make their own food: sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water. So now, how is water absorbed? How is water taken into the plants? How is water taken up by the plants? So when you plant, let's say, a small maize or any type of plant, you are encouraged to water the plants, and that water goes into the soil. And now inside the soil, we've got the roots of the plants. So water is tapped into the body of the plant through the roots. So water enters the plant through the roots. So that's why we have the roots inside the soil, because the water drains into the soil, and then in there, the roots tap the water and take up the water into the plant, into the body of the plant. And that is where the water is used alongside carbon dioxide and sunlight to produce food. So the three important ingredients that are needed are sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water. So we've looked at the first part, which involves the ingredients needed for photosynthesis. So we've done ingredients. This one, check. Are we together on the ingredients needed for the plants? Let me just check that. So we tick the ingredients. So ingredients, we've got water, we've got carbon dioxide, and we've got sunlight. All those things that are needed for plants to make their own food. So now let's look at, where do they make their own food from? Where do you bake from? You bake from a kitchen. So now, which part in the plant is like the kitchen of the plant? So let's look at the venue. Okay, so for us to understand where the venue is, let us look at the ingredients once more. We said we need sunlight. Where is sunlight trapped? Sunlight is trapped in the leaves through the chlorophyll. Then we've looked at carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide enters the plants through the leaves. Then we've got, lastly, water. Water enters the plants through the roots. So if we've noticed, we've got three very important things. These are water, sunlight, and carbon dioxide. And two of them are already in the leaves. Then we've got water that is coming from the roots. So just by that, we can agree to say it would be better if the venue of the cooking, the preparation of the food, would take place in the leaves, because that is where most of the ingredients are. Okay? So venue is in the leaves. So photosynthesis takes place in the leaves of plants. Are we together, grade 7s? So photosynthesis takes place in the leaves of the plants. Then let us look at the preparation, so you can liken this to us baking. We've looked at the ingredients, we've looked at the venue. Now let's look at how to prepare the food, how to bake. Now what do we do? We've got all these things. So what do we do? How do we come up with the perfect meal? How do we make that very nice and delicious food that the plants will eat? So, to prepare the food, what actually happens is that we've got water. We add the water to the, or rather with the carbon dioxide. So water plus carbon dioxide. So water, this is like me teaching you how to cook or how to bake. So I'm going to tell you to say, get your flour, mix your flour with water, and then make dough, something like that. So similarly, to make the food for plants, we get the water, we mix the water with the carbon dioxide, and all this is happening with the help of sunlight. So we say water plus carbon dioxide. All this is happening, is being mixed in the presence of sunlight. So let me just go through that again. So to make the food for plants, we have water. We mix the water with the carbon dioxide. This is happening in the presence of sunlight. Okay, so we can think of this as you mixing flour with water, and this is happening on a stove. So the sunlight is bringing in the energy. It's like bringing in the heat. When you're baking and you have to put the food in the oven, you put it in the oven, You put it in the oven, then turn on the oven to some temperature, and that is what is happening in this case. We've got the water, the carbon dioxide being put together and then being put in an oven, the oven being the sunlight. Okay, are we together? Okay, so water plus carbon dioxide being mixed in the presence of sunlight, and now after these are mixed, what we get is the food that plants need, the food that plants eat. And that food is what is known as glucose. It gives us glucose. Ever heard of glucose? I believe you have. So water plus carbon dioxide in the presence of sunlight gives us glucose. Now, glucose is the food for plants, but apart from the food being produced, plants also produce another product which is known as a byproduct, a by the way thing known as oxygen. Remember when I said plants give out oxygen and take in carbon dioxide? Well, us humans take in oxygen and give out carbon dioxide. Well, it is at this stage that plants give out the oxygen that we do take in. Okay? So let me go through this whole process, or this whole equation. We've got water mixing with carbon dioxide in the presence of sunlight, and that is giving us glucose and oxygen. So if ever you're asked to say what are the products of photosynthesis, the products of photosynthesis are glucose and oxygen. If ever you're asked to say what are the ingredients of photosynthesis, it's water and carbon dioxide in the presence of sunlight. So we've looked at the preparation of the food, or the food that plants take in, or that plants produce. So now, you will not always see this equation in terms of words or in form of words, but there are what are known as chemical symbols. These chemical symbols are understood everywhere across the world. You know, it's easy for you to say water plus carbon dioxide in the presence of sunlight gives us glucose and oxygen, because you're understanding all of this because it's in English. But if we're to use chemical symbols can be like a universal language that anyone can understand. Take chemical symbols to Russia, someone will be able to see, oh, okay, we're talking of water and carbon dioxide and sunlight and glucose and oxygen. So we can rewrite this whole expression that we have, this whole equation that we have, in form of chemical symbols. So when we're talking of chemical symbols, water is symbolized by a big H, a 2, and a big O, like that, then plus. Carbon dioxide is symbolized by a big C, a big O, and a 2. Or sunlight, we'll leave sunlight as sunlight. We'll leave sunlight as sunlight. Then glucose is symbolized by a big C, a 6, big H, a 12, and a big O with a 6, like that. Then plus. Oxygen is simply symbolized by a big O and a 2. Okay? So that is the chemical equivalent of photosynthesis. And to have the same number of H on this side as on the other side, the same number of O's on this side as the other side, and the same number of C's on this side as the other side, we include a big 6 there and a big 6 there. All right? Such that this gives us 6H2O plus 6CO2 equals C6, H12, O6, and the big 6 there, sorry. The big 6 there. So let me go through that again. We've got 6H2O plus 6CO2. This is sunlight. Then we've got C6, H12, O6 plus 6O2. So the most important thing that you have to remember as a grade 7 is that the ingredients needed in the formation of, or in photosynthesis, are water, carbon dioxide in the presence of sunlight, and the products that are produced are glucose and oxygen. Oxygen being what is known as a byproduct. Byproduct, meaning it is not what is needed in this equation, but it is produced by the way. Either way, whether we like it or not, it will be there, but then it's not what we really want. What we're interested in is the food, which is the glucose. Okay, so we say water plus carbon dioxide in the presence of sunlight is equal to glucose plus oxygen. I hope there are no questions on that. So if you've seen, there's an H, there's an H, there's an O, there's a C, there's an O, C, H, O, O. So there are only 3 letters in this chemical equivalent of this expression. And I believe you can guess what these letters stand for. So C stands for carbon, O stands for, give it a guess, oxygen, and the H stands for hydrogen. Okay, so we are there. So this is a very, very important part, and this is where the stake in photosynthesis is. You remembering this equation that we have: water plus carbon dioxide, sunlight, glucose, and oxygen. That's why I've taken so much time to try and emphasize the importance of you knowing this whole equation that we have. Are we together, grade 7s? Okay, so we can move on and see what else we can do and look at in this topic of photosynthesis. So let me just delete that. Okay. So we said, what are the products of photosynthesis? The products of photosynthesis are glucose and oxygen. And we said what we are really interested in is the glucose. And the oxygen is a byproduct. Okay, the oxygen is the byproduct. So if we're saying the glucose is a food, glucose is a carbohydrate. Do you remember what carbohydrates are? Do you know what carbohydrates are? Carbohydrates are simply energy given foods. So carbohydrates are energy given foods. So glucose is a carbohydrate. Glucose is an energy given food. So glucose gives the plants energy. And when we talk of carbohydrates, we're simply talking of sugars. It's a sugar. You know how when you are so tired, so hungry, you decide to make sugar solution, zigolo. You make a sugar solution, you mix the sugar with water, and you say you've got energy now. So similarly, glucose is a sugar, and so glucose gives plants their energy. So plants initially get their energy from the sun, through sunlight. Okay, so we can move on. So we can sum up photosynthesis in one sentence. As I said, I would give you a definition of photosynthesis at the beginning of the lesson, and I would give you a different definition of photosynthesis at the end of the lesson. So photosynthesis, therefore, can be defined as, you can try coming up with your own definition and just see by how much it matches or it aligns with what I'm going to say. So photosynthesis can then be defined as the process by which plants the process by which plants use light. This is light energy. Are we heading the same direction? Photosynthesis is a process by which plants use light energy to transform water and carbon dioxide Photosynthesis is a process by which plants use light energy to transform water and carbon dioxide into glucose and oxygen. So here's a sum up of the definition of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is a process by which plants use light energy to transform water and carbon dioxide into glucose and oxygen. So that's that about photosynthesis. And well, this is the most detailed definition of photosynthesis that we can understand as grade 7s. But even the earlier definition of photosynthesis that I had given is applicable, is okay for you as grade 7s. But once you give such a definition of photosynthesis, you'll be seen to be someone who's understood what he or she is talking about. Okay, so photosynthesis is a process by which plants make their own food, or photosynthesis is a process by which plants use light energy to transform water and carbon dioxide into glucose and oxygen. Okay, all right, grade 7s. So this is it on this topic of photosynthesis. We'll look at, in the next video, we'll look at questions coming from our past papers on the topic of photosynthesis, and we'll try solving as many as we can. And so, thank you very much for watching grade 7s, and see you in the next video.